Yes, we are live. Hello, everyone. We have Rachel Sheaf she's a GTM coach in Factors.ai Road to Revenue series. This is a series which we have been running right from start of this year. We have had many different sales leaders, go-to-market leaders, marketing leaders, LinkedIn ads experts coming on this series. But today we have a very special guest in Rachel. Not just she's a salesperson, but most importantly, she has been a GTM coach and specifically a coach to all sales folks. That's something which is very, very important, especially selling in 2024, given the times which we have been in. How to sell better and most importantly, how to live better is what Rachel will be talking about to us. Welcome, everyone, and welcome here, Rachel. Very, very happy to have you on board here.
Amazing. Thank you for having me, Shri.
Thanks a lot, Rachel, and thanks a lot for being on the LinkedIn Live with Factors.ai. Before we jump in, while your LinkedIn profile is pretty extensive, and you are a kind of a respected speaker in almost multiple sales panels and podcasts and others. But if you can take maybe a couple of minutes to introduce yourself, your background, how you found sales or how sales found you, that will be very interesting for us to hear.
For sure. Yeah. So, been in sales for around about 8 or so years now, mostly in the B2B SaaS space. So, mostly in sort of various high growth, early stage startups. Most recently, I was at a company called Metadata for a couple of years. Prior to that, ran partnerships at Vidyard. Also had a couple of stints in sort of smaller startups, more scrappier kind of environments, and got my start in a company called Hootsuite. So that's kind of sort of the tech sales portion. I've also had, prior to that, some agency kind of experience as well. So more marketing, kind of digital advertising sort of thing. And then how I actually got my start originally was a little bit of a sort of a left field thing. I actually went to school for design. So did game design as a focus for my university degree. Was always very kind of creative and did that for kind of a couple of years outside of school before making my transition into sales. So bring I guess more of a creative approach into what it is that I do. Have always kind of tried to keep that theme in the way that I sell, and I think kind of differentiates my approach as well.
That's an amazing kind of journey. But more importantly, I mean, nobody does go to college for sales, but it's basically sales finds you inevitably based on background. Sometimes people come from math backgrounds or engineering into sales, or they come in from art or history. But creative game design is very interesting, and which also shows into like what you do with sales itself, both in terms of virtual selling and how do you use video or social selling or other creative approaches into your sales. So let's deep dive into the topic as well from that angle. Uh, One thing which has been clear right after the pandemic, as Factors today, we were one of the companies which just started right in the middle of the pandemic. We quit our jobs. The lockdown started in 2020, May, June. By the time we were able to even get on our feet and start a company, which is register a company, get people, get folks, and all, it was like July, August. So we lived through the pandemic, and all our first 30 employees hired were completely remote. We hired them remotely, and they also worked with us remotely. And that started off, and that has almost become a norm. I think we've also realized over a period of time, we get some of our best people to work with us. And they prefer to be in their hometowns or in their separate places because that's what makes sense, and that works remotely. We also saw a recent Upwork ad also which says like the world is changing. The best way to find people is not to get them to office, but actually work with them wherever they work from and remotely. So this is a consistent secular trend. There would be some hybrid approaches, etc., but working remotely and especially great sales folks working remotely is a standard trend. So having stated those facts or that kind of trends which is there, we'd like to get your opinion on like what do you look at one being a salesperson selling or working from remote, and more importantly the trends around like what are the things which a salesperson should look at when he's working remotely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's funny because how long ago was I was 2020, we're already 4 years kind of into this new way of working, but still in many ways it feels quite new, right? People are still trying to kind of understand, what does great look like in this world. There just hasn't been a time in the world where this has been the norm. But the fact is, it's certainly here to stay. The technology exists, the infrastructure exists, and certainly mindsets are now sort of in this new frame, such that employees and salespeople certainly are coming to kind of expect this, right? Including the best ones that you want to hire. So, I mean, a couple of things. I think the biggest thing that I see that is going to determine the success of your sales hire in this type of environment is people who have an intrinsic motivation to win, right? Certainly, it's in the boiler room environment where, you've got someone looking over your shoulder to make 100 calls a day, doing the right sort of things, kind of motivation by force isn't going to be there anymore. And as managers and leaders, you kind of have to be okay with that relinquishing of control to a certain extent. Chances are you're not going to see your salesperson perform, other than, in the sort of a one-on-one or kind of in terms of the actual outputs that you're tracking. So you have to kind of get it right from the beginning and really kind of understand the motivations of the person that you're hiring, the character, the beliefs that they have around achieving certain goals, which is then obviously going to get you a higher rate of success when they're actually in the role, right? So kind of that intrinsic motivation, I think, is kind of the biggest factor, more so than any kind of judgment based on past logos and companies that they've been at. These things are becoming, I think, less and less important as an indicator of future success. Managers and leaders really need to be able to vet something that goes a little bit deeper in terms of why that salesperson will be committed to the role.
Oh, that's an interesting point. That's more touching on the qualitative. That is, like, one, you look for their intrinsic motivations. Second, you should also be able to give trust to get results. So you have to trust what they are doing and how they are doing things, which is there. But how do we also give a certain kind of quantitative actions to it? Like, is there any using tools with it, or like, how do managers or founders specifically, because I was looking at companies which are like, it's like early product market fit, or the 1 to 5 million range, which is still a founder-led sales, where like founders manage sales teams or personally work with sales teams on a day-to-day basis. How do they quantitatively get comfort in working with remote sales or sellers selling remotely?
Yeah. So it's really interesting, Andrew, because we are at such an inflection point where this playbook, of how to enable your salespeople to be successful is still constantly changing, right? What worked 6, 12 months ago isn't necessarily going to be the thing that works now. And that is also a factor too. You've got to get people who are able or adaptable to change and comfortable with picking up new technology and ways of interacting with the buyer to get the outcome that you want. The buying journey is also changing, right? We're thinking about, I think Gartner did a report where they said 9% of this buyer's time is spent with the seller. That's pretty crazy, right? If we try to think about, okay, like, how are we over-engineering this 9% of time that we have with the buyer to try and get the outcome that we want, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure to begin with, right? So as salespeople and as leaders, you really need to think about the other 91% in terms of how you're kind of influencing that sale. And fortunately, there are lots of tools and kind of plays that you can kind of incorporate. So the list goes on. I've got lots of these, but one thing that I'd say really kind of stands out today is thinking about using things like deal rooms. Video selling. Deal rooms is actually one of the biggest things that I've incorporated into my playbook. There's tons of tools that kind of touch on this. Yeah, Page, Journey, there's a lot there. But using one of these gives you kind of an asset that you can kind of equip your buyer with to really kind of sell for you, within their organization, which of course, the more complex the deal, the larger the buying committees involved, this becomes increasingly important. So happy to expand on that, but that's one of the things that I'm seeing.
That's pretty amazing. One is like, it is remote selling, and remote selling in 2024 is going to be difficult. And in this, you made an important point that actual engagement, that is like a video call or some form of like email engagement, is only 9% of the buyer journey. Before that, the buyer is researching whatever the documents which you're sending to him in different forms and different places. He's also maybe reviewing the company in different parts. He's also maybe checking out your review pages or review sites, etc., which is there, or even talking to other customers just to get feedback about you. And influencing them is going to accelerate deals. So that's one of the things which the themes which we have, like how do you cut through the noise to get to the sale faster or accelerate deals, which is there. And one thing which you talked about is deal room. What else do you do to influence the remaining 91% so that more you are in front of him or more the value you give, you can actually close the deal instead of 4 months, you can actually do it in 2 months or 2.5 months. What do you do here? If you can expand on that in terms of influencing the remaining 91%.
For sure. So I think, again, you always have to put yourself in the seat of the buyer, right? And think about how you, even as a consumer, go about making a decision as to what to purchase. You probably do your research. You maybe look at YouTube videos. You ask your friends. You look through kind of different review sites. This is the exact same thing for B2B buying as well. So as a result, how are you as a founder kind of trying to architect that experience such that you're, obviously creating the best favorable impression for yourself? And number one, but number two, also making it really clear to the end buyer, like what problem is it that you solve? Why is the way that you solve it better than others? And just making that choice really clear. And I think it is becoming really difficult. It's obviously easier to start a company than ever today, and a lot of tools, a lot of competitors. We're hitting almost a saturation point, when it comes to tech. So this becomes just an increasingly important thing for you to really sort of figure out. So yeah, I mean, as an early stage founder, thinking about kind of a specific example. So most recently was a company called Metadata. And I think we did a really good job of this. Metadata is a paid media execution platform. Essentially, it allows B2B marketers to get more pipeline out of their spend through AI and automation. And the way that our marketing team, and starts from marketing, really approached this problem was really good. So we did things that didn't really scale to start. We really focused on brand. So things like podcasts, things like a community that we built for demand gen folks, lots of kind of educational content across all different channels. And same thing too, coming from our marketing and sales leaders as well, right? Kind of trying to create that give first mentality and educate the market on what problem was that we were solving, why the way that it was being solved wasn't good enough. And, if the person wanted to learn a little bit more, how Metadata could solve it in a better way. So, Mark and Jason were our marketing leaders, from the very beginning, and I think did an excellent job at this. And as a result, made salespeople's lives so much easier, when we got the people on the call, because we already had kind of that trust and goodwill built up. And it's kind of like, what we're doing right now, even with sort of, kind of streams and podcasts like this. You want the person to not be super cold, right? As soon as they get on that call, like doing sort of lead gen blasts, email blasts, you're not going to get a very high conversion rate if you're not kind of doing that work up front of warming up your audience through, the way that they like to educate themselves to begin with.
Oh, that's an excellent point, and which is basically like no call is a cold call. That is when the salesperson or someone reaches out to a prospect or even gets into the first call, there is a significant amount of a kind of a brand recall, and more importantly, a solution recall. It's not just like I know what metadata is, or like I know of metadata, or I have heard metadata before. I actually know what metadata does. That kind of a brand recall, which marketing or social selling and few other kind of like general brand awareness which has been created, makes it very, very easy for the sales team. So one tip which I take forward is like, for startups and for even companies which are in the 1 to 5 million stage, which is there, running marketing in a way where like they would be able to target a set of prospects and make sure that they are brand and solution aware before reaching out to them, or before the sales team actually reaches out to them and then covers. That would make a lot of sense, which is there, so that they have the full kind of like, it doesn't become a cold call, it actually becomes a little bit warmed up, so that the seller is able to build on the trust which the brand has already built on, which is that makes sense. One more thing which is here is like, do you use any intent data to kind of like try and understand if there has been a brand recall in the first place? For example, when you reach out to prospects, or before you reach out to prospects as a seller, what kind of intent data do you use before reaching out, so that you know that he's already aware of you?
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, this is a big topic because intent is such a ambiguous term, like ranging from sort of the third-party intent tools, ABM tools like the 6 Senses or demand bases of the world, they're ranging to more the first-party stuff. Maybe people who've visited your website, qualified warmly. There's a lot of tools kind of in this space that can kind of get you that data. Lead Feeder, Dealfront, the
Factors.ai also does the same website
right.
intent and the same. That's one of the reasons.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, the fact is, you kind of have to really kind of understand what you're looking for as well, because it is also easy to get bogged down in this data as well. Common Room actually is a very interesting one. I saw that they recently come out, kind of accumulates all these sort of intent signals into a really easy way to do it. So yeah, I mean, we at Metadata used Qualified for this purpose to kind of see who the website visitors were, and using that as a signal that they were maybe sort of more warmed up. I do think it requires a deeper level of analysis too, just again to not overly kind of over-index your time on somebody just because they visited a page on your website either. Like certainly there's tiers, right? And if the tool, I don't know if Factors does this, but understanding who's maybe visited a pricing page or a demo page, of course, make sure that you prioritize your time sort of with those folks. But yeah, the fact is you can also get kind of creative here as well. I don't know if anyone in your audience has tried maybe even like LinkedIn likes and engagement with perhaps maybe your prospect, your ideal kind of prospect is liking a post of somebody who is like a important figure in your industry or your space, and maybe the post is relevant to what it is that you're talking to. That's also kind of like another funny like intent signal that you can use. Again, we had a Slack community of about 2,500 marketers, and they were asking questions all the time about this sort of thing. So maybe having a mechanism where you can sort of feed those signals to your sales reps in a way that is still natural and organic when you do engage with those people who are actually doing research in maybe sort of your space. So yeah, there is lots of ways to kind of see in intent, and make sure you're using it successfully. The key thing really, I think, is for sales leaders and founders to kind of get very clear on what that means, where what that might sort of mean in terms of engaging with that buyer, because for salespeople it can actually also be quite overwhelming, right, with all these sort of different signals coming through. So you need kind of like a playbook, and you need to kind of define what a good intent signals are, because it can also lead people to be chasing things that aren't real.
Matter. So just instead of drowning into the noise, maybe like a kind of a coaching where like, okay, these are the things which you focus on. These are the tools which you have to get the data. I mean, there are multiple tools. Either you have the larger ones like 6 Sense and others, which is on third-party intent, or the others like Factors.ai, Qualified, and others which give you on the website intent, or like who's looking at where and the pricing page and other thing. Plus third, you also have like community signals, which is like you are on Slack communities and others where like people talk about your brand. You also engage with some conversations there. So you have a certain kind of a connect with the prospect in some level before you actually get into the call, or like nudge them towards the call and then try and sell. That's interesting. So going a little deeper, the prospect is one, marketing has shown some ads to them and they have actually made the brand aware. Second is like you also know by community, by website, by third-party intent signals, the prospect is aware. then how do you actually go into the next step, that is like setting up the call or pushing them to get into a call, so that it's like you have created an interest, but how do you get them into some form of a sales process after that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, there's multiple different ways to kind of look at this. I think it really requires a good mindset around like segmentation, and really kind of using the data that you have to try and form a hypothesis in terms of where this person is on the funnel of awareness. And it's not going to be a perfect science, right? Like you can have people who are just sort of engaging and doing all these sorts of things and, still never want to buy your tool. That's fine. But yeah, I think just kind of like sort of segmenting that out. I think the first party data is probably where you want to prioritize your time, certainly using a factors or qualified or whatever, and really understanding like what maybe sort of the high intent pages that they're looking at, using that then to really kind of tailor your outreach, whether it's an email sequence, whether it's a phone call. I would incorporate LinkedIn here as well, right? I think it's always a good idea to add all of your prospects on LinkedIn, and not from a perspective of like, let's sell to you right now, but even if you're not ready, like you are my connection, you're seeing my content, you're seeing stuff that maybe, my company is doing, and you're inherently kind of building that trust such that when the time is right, I'm going to be the person that you call. So I try to call to LinkedIn as kind of like a mandatory touch. From there, sort of the emails, I would always, yes, if you've got a phone call, if you've got kind of a Zoom info or Lead IQ, like get the phone number. It's always worth making a call. I think we are kind of going through a period of time where people are more reluctant to make cold calls, perhaps because of the inundation of like tech that we've got available to us to engage otherwise. But that human to human interaction is never going to be replaced by 20-step email sequence either. And again, if you can make a pretty good hypothesis that this person is within your ICP and has some sense of intent to buy your tool, like why not? So
that's great. I think you went into the social part of it where you nudge on the social side also. One more thing which I was going through your GTM coaching and other thing is like, how do you integrate video into your selling process and personalized videos? You have a lot of video tools. You have worked yourself at Vidyard. How do you actually start looking at video into your selling process?
Yeah. So
how does it work as well? Does it impact? Does it kind of like sometimes not work? What are the things to make it work right?
It all kind of goes back to the idea that people want to, people like to buy, they don't like to be sold to. And that comes with educating themselves on the problem, the industry, the different tools that are out there, versus just a salesperson telling them this information, right? And we are at a stage where that's possible. So see video is almost like a tool that facilitates that, in the sense that it's kind of asynchronous. You're kind of providing a deposit, you're providing information and engaging with that individual in a way that isn't kind of this traditional sort of maybe pushy sort of salesperson way. It's a smarter way to sell. It doesn't replace some of these other mediums. It's a supplementation. Another thing to think about too is that something that can be used across all phases of the sales cycle, from prospecting to deal management to proposals, and all the way to closing the deal, social proof, and even customer management post sale. So it really is kind of a mechanism that you can use at any point. And it's really not rocket science either. It's just sort of thinking about, from the customer's point of view, how can I sort of make this experience as optimal as possible for my buyer? So, I mean, for instance, I've used it for prospecting. I closed a deal that started with a video to a person I worked with like 5 years ago, right? I didn't really sort of interact with this person very much, but we were connected. So she was working now with the person I was trying to get in touch with, the director of demand gen. Sent this email to her saying, hey, look, I'm looking to get in touch with John, from your team. This is the 3 reasons why I think it makes sense for us to chat. And that just created a really nice way for just her to forward that on to the individual. And she's eventually got the conversation, a couple of days later. So really, really easy way to do that. And also thinking too about throughout the deal, as you're kind of sort of working things? Are there questions that can be just more easily answered over video? People are obviously more distracted than ever. They're getting so many emails. People don't want to read maybe sort of a 10-page long sort of paragraph explaining kind of certain features and things. Is there a way that you can make that experience better through a short demo video, right? Or, customer reference or whatnot. So the sky's the limit in terms of how you can use it. It really just all comes down to creativity and the experience that you're creating for the buyer. If you can always sort of keep that in mind, you'll always do well with it.
Any examples where you have been sold to creatively, either through video or any other thing? If you can share where you felt like, oh, that's a good play. And what's this?
That's a good question. I mean, all the instances that I can think of where I engaged with a vendor and eventually bought something from them, it's always started with credibility and trust, right? Is it something that, I really admire what they're sharing on LinkedIn? Are there friends of mine that have worked with this individual and can sort of attest to those, the quality of their work? So caveat, I'm not a CEO of some company where I'm constantly evaluating software, right? This is more so from maybe sort of consultants, coaches, people who can sort of help up-level me in certain parts of the way that I work. But yeah, anyone I've ever then paid money to in order to help me in a certain area has always started with that. And LinkedIn for me has usually been kind of the genesis point, because I'm just on there all the time and kind of learn and educate myself through that channel. But yeah, that credibility is key, and it starts with them giving away, quite frankly, a lot of their knowledge to start. Then it becomes like, okay, how can you actually help me implement this when I start working with you?
Got it. That's interesting. One thing which also, you mentioned social selling, you mentioned LinkedIn. Do you also engage with the prospect around in Twitter or in Instagram or others as well? Is that something which is recommended? What are the lines there? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense?
Yeah. So for me, it doesn't make as much sense to do that. Wouldn't rule it out perhaps for other industries. But to me, it's just noise that doesn't really move the needle in any way.
Got it. So stick to the professional levels, which is basically LinkedIn. Look at then other creative ways of reaching out to them, making them aware of your brand, building the trust, and then getting the engagement on, which is there. How do you reach out to and what you do, which is there. So now you talked about very clearly, I think in the beginning itself, is like how you can use a deal room to actually nurture a sales through that. So you have done the brand, the marketing team has done the creating the brand event. Then you use intent tools to know who's in the prospect. Then you connect with them into some form of LinkedIn and other aspects. Specifically with regard to LinkedIn, do you use any kind of LinkedIn sales automation tools, or it's like completely which is personalized?
Yeah, I mean, obviously LinkedIn Sales Navigator is very important for any salesperson now to get a sense of the buying committee. And I mean, I'm not a huge fan of their buying intent signals. Like, I don't know where that's coming from. There hasn't been any evidence to me as to those being more valuable prospects than others. Again, you don't want to deal with intent signals where the formula for which is kind of in a black box, which I think can be the case with a lot of these third-party tools. You just don't know is it a janitor looking at your ad for this company? Like, how do you know? So that question mark has always led me to not really sort of lean on that. I mean, LinkedIn automation, I have tried some of these tools in the past. Like, probably when I was at a startup back in 2018-ish, 15-person company, zero brand presence. We had a handful of really good customers, the Best Buys, the Ashley Home Stores of the world, but we were still tiny compared to kind of the incumbents. So as salespeople, you obviously are trying to do all that you can to accelerate kind of your learnings. And I tried one of these sort of like LinkedIn, they'll connect and engage with people. I personally didn't see too much success there, but I'm also conscious that times have changed. It's like fast forward like 6 years now. Maybe these things have improved. I'm sure they have, and are becoming more human-like and personalized. And as we know, AI is the other big thing that we're not talking about on this call in terms of just how fast the development there is and how close, really, it's becoming to really kind of replacing a lot of the aspects of the sales process, and a lot of senses too, like salespeople, right? Like kind of the ones who might be doing more lower level work. So yeah, personally haven't seen too much success with those, but I'm sure things
Got
might
it.
change as well.
Got it. So you have the LinkedIn connection and other this thing. You have the call and other this thing. Now you talked about having a deal room and also working with content to make the deal room richer and nudge the sales team doing this thing. How does the interaction work? As like, do you actively involve product marketing to develop customized content, or you work with existing resources and then have a feedback loop on how do you do it? What is the kind of the next steps which you take as you proceed through the deal? And I'm just trying to look through your scenario of like what works best so that that can be actually a playbook for the rest of the sellers or the founders which are doing this.
Yeah. So I mean, okay, when I talk about a deal room, I'm talking about a kind of a tool that functions as sort of this leave behind asset that lives on beyond your conversation with the buyer that they can then take to other stakeholders, decision makers in order to influence the deal, right? And the problem that's kind of solving is you don't want to rely on your buyer to sell on your behalf. They're not going to get your messaging right. They're not going to get the value prop right. Obviously, they have to kind of co-own the process, but you can't leave that to chance. So in order to kind of retain the fidelity of that message, a deal room is really effective. And this is something that you can run entirely without the help of any other, kind of departments of your company, right? You might pull in aspects of, marketing collateral. We, metadata, I pulled in sort of like demo videos, sort of social proof. I would also pull in things like maybe customer wins from our own Slack channel that we would share, and almost seemed a little bit more authentic than a G2 or, Trustpilot kind of review. So think about what kind of experience you can kind of create with that deal room that goes above and beyond what is just already kind of publicly available. Goes a long way. And from there, like, it's very easy. Like I just had a template, you kind of duplicate it according to whatever prospect that you're working, make some tweaks. You also want to personalize wherever possible as well. So, depending on where that person's is, what you heard of their challenges, maybe root causes and ways that your product or solution can solve those, which again, should be very simple and succinct to read and something they can easily take to an important, a busy executive who doesn't have time to listen to a whole pitch, right? So that's something, again, you want to just leave at the end of your call. Hey, here's my page or my journey or, whatever tool that you choose to use. And then, from there, this can constantly evolve too, right? In another deal that I worked, it went from kind of the North American team, and that was kind of like one specific deal room that I used. Then my champion brought in the European team, who was like 10 different stakeholders from Germany, France, Singapore, et cetera, which required almost like a different approach because their needs and problems were vastly different to North America, right? So and there was also maybe a little bit of kind of politics at play where maybe they didn't need to know information that the North American team was knowing, and the pricing was a little bit different. So you want to kind of tailor this as well. Business cases, pricing, implementation times, onboarding, like all of this stuff too, you can start to incorporate into the deal room as you move the deal forwards as well. Eventually, legal security. You just want to make your prospect's life as easy as possible, not digging through emails for this sort of thing when you can all just have it in like almost like a little media kit that they can use in perpetuity.
Totally makes sense. One other thing which we have seen, and some of the questions which also came to us in this thing, in this kind of selling and virtual selling, and where you have a lot of stakeholders involved. Where do you involve your subject matter experts, or your even let's say your VP sales, or sometimes your CEO in a startup use case, or even other people within the team? How do you get the multi-stakeholder game in action to accelerate the deal?
Yeah, so I think you want to just think about it from the perspective of like matching the right people on either side with almost their equivalents on the buyer side. For that first call, if that person, for instance, is inviting their boss to the call, their VP marketing or whomever, just go ahead and invite your VP sales, right? We want to kind of match up those individuals on both sides. So that's a really good signal to do that. If you're just dealing with a lower level marketing coordinator or marketing manager, and they're never really kind of going to that next level engagement, despite you asking, to bring your boss on the call or whomever, maybe that's a sign that the deal isn't quite there yet. So maybe hold off on bringing your leadership in, right? Or you can still, there's still things that you can do. Like if you do sense that there's something there, maybe have your CEO reach out to their CEO, right? And that's not something that you're really kind of impacting. That's a very normal thing to do. So more kind of like puppet string pulling on the back end.
Yes.
Yeah, other subject matter experts. Yeah, certainly if you feel like you maybe like you're dealing with a really technical person on the other side, of course, great signal to bring in a product or solutions consultant on your side. You just want to think about how you're not having that person leave the call with any kind of like gaps or questions about some of your credibility, and architecting it from your side in terms of some of those the other stakeholders.
Makes a lot of sense. Actually, I like that. Make that puppet kind of other thing where like you kind of coordinate multiple stakeholders and then nudge them in the right sense, so that actually brings to a better deal acceleration, which goes through here. One question which also kind of like which comes in, especially in this era, is like there's a lot of budget withdrawals. Like companies don't want to spend on expensive tools, or almost every single expenditure gets called out. How do you negotiate the pricing strategy? Because you have a certain quota to meet, you have to close the deal. People might walk off if the numbers don't match. And also you have a certain pricing which you can actually sell. How do you propose and get the value through and also get your pricing through in these kind of situations? Especially for startups, because like every deal matters. They don't want to lose deals, but at the same time, they don't want to have deals which come through at very low rates.
Mm-hmm. Wow, really complex topic here. Definitely not one that can be done in a one single can be done in one session or one answer. Super nuanced. I mean, looking at the highest level, the reality is in this market, and this is kind of affirmed by a lot of folks that I know who are executives and in PE space and stuff like this. The fact is, like, a lot of startups are going to die, I think, in 2024 and 2025, because, we were in an era where, investment capital and, raising funding was just a much easier thing to do, right? Even if the company didn't actually have a product yet, or, didn't have a real problem that they were solving. It's just night and day. So we also just have to sort of keep that in mind, right? Like, as on the founder level, like, it's just about going back to basics, like thinking about the customer problems, and am I actually solving something that's important enough for this person to invest in this, and kind of like doing more of a deeper analysis there. Do I need to make a pivot, right? Do I need to change my business model, how I go to market? Am I a little bit ambitious in terms of like really thinking I can go to enterprise now when, again, it might not be worth it. So that's one thing. And then on the sales side, again, let's assume that is sorted. It's just about understanding kind of the levers that you have to negotiate and being very upfront with your buyer about those things. People don't want to play games. People recognize that you can get discounts and you can negotiate yourself into a better deal. And this is a whole other topic in and of itself. I did a course on negotiation as well. But I think really understanding what's important to your buyer will help you in that negotiation. Sometimes it's not just about price. Price is just one element. Think about, there are like extra sort of seats that you can provide, licenses, are there kinds of references? Can you do a case study that's going to make them look really important? A webinar? There's all these sorts of different things that doesn't really get taught that much in typical sales training and negotiation, and can often help you get the outcome that you want without ruining your margins entirely. Because again, these companies have budgets for software. Sometimes something that, you just, salespeople automatically lead with a discount. Sometimes it's really not necessary. They're looking for something else. And if you can kind of come to that win-win situation by thinking a little bit outside of the box, it's going to serve both of you better.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. One question which you made a kind of a overarching point, like a lot of startups might die, and there's also a question of like what's important for the customers. Budgets are constrained, what's going to happen? So you have to find multiple levers beyond pricing as well, which can help you push the deal through. How do you help, or like as a GTM coach, what's your advice for salespeople to handle the stress? Because it is a tough year to sell, but they need to have the job, they need to sell to have the job, they need to find the way to actually position the product and make things work. But it's also highly stressful. Deals don't happen on time, budgets don't come through very easily, and you have to find ways to do it and also keep your kind of live better, which is there, as you mentioned. What would you, as a GTM coach, both for founders and also for sales leaders, or like some of the early salespeople in startups or like even mid-sized companies, what would be your advice there?
Yeah. Well, good question. So yeah, on the founder and sales leader level, I'd say, honesty is kind of the best policy, right? Don't mess your people around. Don't kind of create fear or like lead by sort of using sort of these sorts of tactics that you think will drive short-term results, but will end up in long-term pain for you in terms of people just leaving and not dealing with it. So yeah, also recognizing from that level too, like people do have choices now, right? They're not bound to just working for your company because they signed a piece of paper. So I think, and creating sort of a very honest, authentic environment where people can feel comfortable to share concerns and fears that they might have, especially at the junior level. It is really difficult thinking about remote selling. If you're just an SDR, like you're straight out of college, you don't have any support, you just got your computer, right? Things can seem like a bit of a simulation, I think, eventually at some point. So kind of creating that human connection, giving people space to pursue other things that they want to do will then ultimately create a better work environment as well. And then, yeah, on a salesperson front, really, again, just not attaching your identity to work too much is critical. Understanding that there's a lot more of the world out there than the calls that you make and the numbers that you put up. Obviously, it is important, and that's why you have to obviously hire for people who are intrinsically motivated and are driven to succeed. But again, provided that is already sorted, you want to ensure that you kind of have that perspective, right, in terms of what's really kind of important to you, and that's going to ultimately, just help you perform better in your job eventually as well. So, yeah, big question, but those are some small tips in terms of just having some.
No, you made an important point. It's like, especially when people are selling remotely and also you're just out of college, maybe a couple of years out of college, the founder is also in high stress. He's also selling. Most of the time you're stuck with a headphone and a room and kind of making calls and trying to make some things move and other thing. It can be very stressful, but going out and looking outside the whole thing helps. But as founders, let's say, even if I'm a founder, we work with the remote sales teams, and there are quite a few like me. I mean, there's a huge community like me. How do you bridge the gap, or like help salespeople bridge the gap between, like, say, being virtual always into some form of physical connection, and kind of like that would also then come back into the loop to make people feel better to sell better? How do you handle that kind of a gap? Do you do offsites? Do you do events? Do you get them to office sometimes? What is the lines which you can make it work? What are the kind of tips to make it better?
Yeah, so I mean, some in-person element for sure always helps. You need to feel like you're working with real life people and getting to know them a little bit more, and that's also important too, to build trust over time. If you feel like these people are kind of always at an arm's length, maybe you're not going to feel as motivated, over a longer time horizon to continue to perform, because it's just kind of like, another kind of transaction. So I'd say, a few instances of that happening. Don't go overboard though. Another thing that I see is almost like over indexing on sort of these culture activities in terms of like virtual happy hours, or, forcing people to travel extreme lengths to sort of meet the team, maybe for something that wasn't even that important. That I don't think is necessary per se. And in some senses too, you kind of have to respect the boundaries of the people who work for you. Maybe they would rather spend that time with their friends and family, right? If there is no real goal or motivation for that. So maybe like once a quarter, we didn't, metadata was sort of a similar kind of cadence, even if less, like twice, 2-3 times a year. I think too, if you're talking about salespeople as well, try to get them in front of their customers as much as possible. I'd say that was a big motivator for me. Always at any media company that I worked at, because you get to up level that skill of like delivering an in-person presentation. Kind of like that's a very different type of sale, and is going to really help improve your reps in another fashion, right? And that can also be a conduit for meeting more members of your team, whether it's the sales leaders, SMEs, etc. So
got it. I should have asked this question first itself, of course, but better late than never asking this. One thing is like, how do sales, they are hired virtually and they join the company. The company is a startup, let's say YC 2021 winter batch and other this thing. They have a certain product, 500 to 1 million and this thing. How fast can they ramp up, or what are the kind of things which they need to do to ramp up better? What are the things which the founders or the company needs to do to make sure they ramp up better? Because it's all virtual. There is some things like you can't just make them just keep traveling. You can't do it every week or every this thing. But how do you make sure that this ramp happens very well?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things. Number one, even before you hire any salespeople, you do need to know how to sell your product as a founder. This is something that I've seen the lack of with people that I've coached and sort of trained, whereby they think that, okay, we've got this great idea, we've got this MVP, we've got maybe some interest, cool, it's time to hire a salesperson. Wrong. Like, this is going to set up that person for failure. You're going to just burn that bridge, and you're going to be back at square one once that tenure is over. So be really clear, try to have closed, your first 5, 10, 20 customers yourself as a founder. And this will again vary depending on the market that you're serving, whether it's an enterprise or high velocity transactional. But that's really important so that you can kind of formulate some kind of hypothesis as to how to sell the thing that you're selling. Because keep in mind, this person that you're bringing on probably is going to be more junior in their career, and they haven't had as much industry experience as you have. Maybe they don't know, what is intent, right? What struggles your B2B sales teams kind of go through. All of this, you're going to have to educate them on, from the ground up. So that's really critical. I'd say too, like at the early stages, if we're talking literally, fresh out of YC, trying to get to your first million, leaning on things like paid advisors really will accelerate your timeline as well. People who've sort of been there, done that, maybe don't have necessarily your industry knowledge, which is something that you can supplement, but from a sort of sales skill set knowledge, just give them the basics of, this is how you run a deal from prospecting to close, while you as a founder can continue to focus on other parts of the business. So really sort of thinking about, how can you kind of pull in those resources who are excellent at the things that you don't really kind of want to be over-indexing your time on, and using them to ramp people up, build a playbook around it. And then obviously once you hit a certain parts of point of scale, then, bring in a sales leader or someone internal who can help.
No, that's actually amazing advice in terms of like at a very basic level, what the founders can go wrong in terms of like rather reduce the chances of going wrong by getting the right kind of advisors or people who have skills outside the founder capability, which is there, and ramp up before you actually then hire a sales leader. Hiring is another big thing, which I think is for another topic for another day, because it's like, how do you hire the right salesperson, or how do you get to interview and this thing? But I wouldn't kind of like extend here beyond that. One last thing, it's 2024, the markets are where they are. What would you, any advice to sales folks, especially remote sales folks, selling in software, given your experience over the last 8 years? You would have seen multiple cycles, the low, the high, the super high, and then the super low, and then things happening. What's the kind of advice which you give?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to having perspective, right? Having a life outside of work is really, really important. And this is probably one of the hardest professions in which to do that, because you're not necessarily just constrained by set amount of hours. You are on client's time. If you want to do well, and that can mean weekends, it can mean late nights, depending on time zones. It can burn you out if you're not careful. So cultivating some kind of a practice outside of work and understanding kind of what's important to you is really important. Dedicating time to that, and and understanding what that looks like for you really clearly. Is it meditation? Is it, spending time with friends? Whatever those things are, and making time for that deliberately before you get burnt out will then stave off the inevitable, right, when it comes. So yeah, really critical for especially younger reps, where it's kind of just going to be go, go, go. Like, I've got this energy, I'm just going to keep going. But if you do, like, it's going to run out eventually. So try to keep that in mind.
Sure. I think that's great. I think find ways not to get burnt out. I think if you survive that, I think you'll eventually become a great salesperson. And that's good. Thanks a lot, Rachel. Thanks a lot for this, a lot of inputs. It's been almost an hour now, and thanks for the inputs. I have taken multiple notes. We'll also create multiple snippets out of this, also to share with both internal sales folks and also to our LinkedIn community and our Slack community as well, to all the founders, a lot of startup founders from India working with the US and other markets as well. So we'll share the details and make that work. Thanks a lot, Rachel.
Amazing. Thanks for having me.
Same here. Bye. Just end the stream.